Good evening. Welcome to the fifth installment of our Beyond Bytown virtual talk series. My name is Steve Mattiusi. I'm the Bytown Museum's Manager of Visitor Experience, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Renee Hayward from the museum. So, grazie mille for joining us tonight. And now that I've exhausted my Italian, let's officially get started. So first, of course, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. The city of Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and the peoples of the Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this place. Now, first of all, just to let everyone know, in order to share this with those who couldn't make it tonight, we will be recording this talk. As I mentioned, it is the fifth talk in our Beyond Bytown series. So this is a series that seeks to bring to light stories that are either more contemporary or haven't received as much attention as perhaps they should, or both. So our talk tonight will, of course, focus on the history of Ottawa's Italian community. I think it's fair to say it's been a pretty good time for the Italian community lately. So June is Italian Heritage Month. Ottawa just wrapped up another Italian week that I hope everyone was able to enjoy. Also, if you're following the Euro Cup Championship, then you'll join me in celebrating the Azzurri's amazing 3 wins so far and advancement to the round of 16. How about that? I also confess I'm particularly excited about our discussion tonight, given my own family's Italian heritage. But without further ado, we are pleased also to be joined tonight by a wonderful guest speaker. Lifelong resident of Ottawa, Trina Costantini-Powell graduated from Carleton University with a degree in history and political science. Her interest in these fields led to a 35-year career with the Library of Parliament. She was elected as president of the National Congress of Italian Canadians National Capital District in 2016, and a second vice president at the Congress at the national level. Trina's also worked in the Italian community for close to 30 years. She was president of the St. Anthony's Church Ladies Auxiliary for 12 years, chair of the Ottawa Italian Women's Philo from 2005 to 2009, vice president of Italian Week Ottawa from 2009 to 2015, co-chair of St. Anthony of Padua 100th Anniversary Centennial Book Project, A Journey of Faith, A History of St. Anthony of Padua Church, how about that? And director of the Dalhousie Food Cupboard from 2005 to the present. Trina is a recipient of the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers in 2017, as well as a recipient of the Provincial Leading Girls, Leading Women Award. She's also a recipient of the Ottawa Women's Philo Award for Community Service from 2010. Trina acts as the Research and Nominations Committee Chair at Ottawa Distinguished Women. So quite a resume. Now, before I hand things over to Trina, as always, I want to remind everybody of how events like this work. So our guests will obviously be starting things off with their talk, with their history of the community, which will be followed up by a couple questions from Renee and I for a discussion between Renee, myself, and Trina. And then, of course, as always, we'll top things off with some audience participation. So for those of you who have joined us tonight, if throughout the evening you think of a question or a comment you'd like to share with us, please do not hesitate to type out your question or comment using the Q&A function, which you can find and you can access via the button at the bottom of your Zoom window. So that once again, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function, and we'll get to as many questions and comments as we can, particularly with historic talks like this. We always like people to share any personal stories they have regarding the Italian community. It's a pretty close-knit community in a lot of ways, so please don't hesitate to participate with the Q&A function. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you to Trina for agreeing to participate and share this history with us. And with that, Renee will share her screen. We'll get the PowerPoint up, and Trina, I will hand things off to you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you as well to your colleagues Rebecca Webb and Renee Hayward for some guidance over these past couple of weeks. I want to thank the Bytown Museum for reaching out to the National Congress of Italian Canadians and honoring us with this presentation. And it truly is an honor to be able to talk about our community. I also want to just thank as well the Lowertown Community Association, the Glebe Historical Society, the Italian Canadian Historical Center, the Journey of Faith book and my colleagues on that book, and the many families and associations who have provided pictures and materials for this evening's presentation. This is going to be only a cursory look. It's not all encompassing, and we've only got a certain amount of time to do so. So let us begin. Renee? So we see here on this screen, there's two maps, and these were taken from the census of 1870-71. One of them is St. George's Ward and By Ward, and this is where you find some of the early Italian Canadian or Italians in Ottawa. They haven't become Canadians yet. They're still actually under they're still British subjects. You know, when they come to Ottawa, but you're finding them in these wards, and these wards are located in the lower town part of Ottawa. And they live side by side with many French Canadian families, with Jewish families, and with a lot of the Irish families. The Irish families you'll find attending St. Bridget's Church, and St. Bridget's influence comes into play later on. You also have a number of Italians who live in Rochesterville. And Rochesterville is currently the area surrounding St. Anthony's Church right now, Rochester Street, Booth Street, or as it was known, Division Street. And you will find that at this time, there's probably about 200 Italians living in Ottawa. Everybody who's familiar with Preston Street will be familiar with this cross sign. Preston Street, Corso Italia, which became a ceremonial name in 1986, following a petition to City Hall. And so if you've been along Preston Street and sampled many of the great restaurants and the businesses, you're very familiar with seeing this sign. The next picture is Giovanni Angotti, and this is a gentleman pictured with his son, Bruno, who's 13 at this time. And they've come from New Brunswick to Ottawa to work on the railroad. This picture is from in and around 1893 or so. Now, when I talk about the population at that time, we're looking at, as I say, in and around 200 Italians. You'll see that by 1927, there's about 1,000. 1947, there's about 3,000. And that's when immigration starts to happen. 1961, there's about 10,000. 1974, there's about 20,000. And right now, well, in the most current census of 2016, you have a little over 53,000 who identify as having Italian heritage. So if we move to the next slide. So as I mentioned, St. Bridget's Church with the Irish presence down in Lower Town. And along Murray Street, there was a small chapel that became available to the Italian congregation. And for a while in 1908, they had attended St. Francis Church out in the West End. There was a priest there, Father Fortunato Mizzi, who was a Franciscan friar, part of the Capuchin order. And he would come he would say Mass at St. Francis. And in 2008, a young man of 17 years old, Dominic Nasso, and you'll see the picture there of the Domenico Nasso family in and around 1924. But in 1908, Dominic Nasso comes to Father Fortunato and says, if I bring 15 men on Easter Sunday, would you consider saying Mass for us? We'd like to have our spiritual needs met, and we'd like to have our own congregation where Mass could be said in Italian. And Father Fortunato agrees to that. And so in April of 1908, Easter Sunday, not just 15 men show up, but 150 men show up. Thus, the congregation is born. And the congregation remains on Murray Street until 1913. And this little article that's posted there relates to a fundraiser. This is from 1909, this article, a fundraiser that's been held to raise some funds for the eventual new church. The picture here you'll see a picture of the congregation, as I say, Father Fortunato is in that picture. You'll also see another picture, primarily, it's all men, but there's a special banner there. And those banners came from Murray Street up to the new church. And those banners are still in the presence of St. Anthony's Church to this day. So they are well over 100 and some years old. They show their age, but they truly are a treasure. Next slide. So you see the first mention here of the Italian colony, and the article on the right-hand side pertains to the first St. Anthony's Day celebration. And it takes place in June of 1914. And it is, there's a mass followed by, they call it then a parade, but it does become a religious procession. And the procession of that first St. Anthony's Day followed the route that is still pretty much followed to this day when the procession takes place on St. Anthony's Day. And I just want to read you something from that article. So promptly at 10:15, the scheduled time, the parade formed outside the church. Now, this is the church, as I say, that has opened in 1913. The cornerstone was laid on the Feast of the Holy Trinity in May of 2013, and the church opens in November of 2013. And it's blessed by Father Fortunato is there. It's blessed by the apostolic delegate, the papal delegate, as he's called at that time. And so the first procession in 1914, you have various flags, Canadian, which obviously would be the British flag. You have Irish, French, Italian, etc. The line of parade was crowded with spectators, and hundreds watched the celebration. So you have bands, you have horses, you have the little girls in their first communion dresses. You have, as it quotes here, old men, young men, and maidens walk together. Young damsels with dusky complexions and native sons of a sunny clime. And they reference the banners that I referenced from Murray Street. And as I say, those banners are still in existence today. The next shot is a picture of a St. Anthony's Day procession. Just if you want to go back, Rebecca, just from 1958. This is a shot taken from the Queensway overpass at that time. And if you look closely at it, you will see the priest, and then followed by the gentleman that would carry the statue of St. Anthony. Next slide. Two pictures of St. Anthony Church. You have the church in 1927. You also have the church in and around, I would say, the 1970s or so. And so it pretty much remains in its same state as it was. The church was a fire in 1917 and 1929. And so the church did have to undergo some rebuilding. The cost of the original cost to build the church in 1913 was $25,000, which would have been a considerable sum. When the church was built with the addition later on, that cost in excess a number close to $35,000. And the construction following the fire in 1929 was given to a construction company on the Hull side. Okay. We move on. So with the church hall is very important as well in the community. It acts as an early venue for social and cultural functions. And it becomes, in later years, a first meeting place for many of the new immigrants. The pioneer families know of it. When the new immigrants come in the 50s and 60s, the church hall acts as a venue for language classes, for dances, for dinners. So it's there for the community. There's also a new church hall that is built in the 1960s, and a seniors club operates in the basement of the new church hall. Screen number 5. So the church hall is named currently after Father Jerome Ferraro. And Father Jerome Ferraro probably has to be the most influential, I think, individual in the Italian community. He's a priest. He's also a social worker. He's the finder of jobs. And some people refer to him as a saint. You can't go anywhere in the community without people speaking of the influence of Father Jerome on their lives. He found them jobs. He supported sports teams. He was there for various associations. And he was a very, very well-respected individual. If you look at the bust that was, it rests outside the rectory of the church. You'll see the dates, 1919 to 1979. Well, no, 1972, I'm sorry, not 1979, 1972. Father Jerome passed away tragically in a car accident in 1972. Only a young man of 52 years of age, but the loss was felt by both the Italian community and the community at large. He was known as the priest of the village. And when you refer to the village, you refer to the area in and around Preston Street and up towards the church. The village is just such a commonly known term. And Father Jerome was somebody who was very, very instrumental in that. He's known, as I say, outside the Italian community. He's also responsible for the formation of St. Anthony's Soccer Club in 1952. They start out with a small little clubhouse off of Preston Street. And many of the new immigrants that have come to Ottawa sign up to play soccer. And that is something new because the sons of the pioneer families were more interested in other sports like hockey and baseball. So you have the new immigrants bringing their game to Ottawa. And this is a picture of a winning team in 1955. And you'll see Father Jerome is in this picture. And the bust of Father Jerome, as I say, following his passing, a group of community leaders assembled and raised funds so that that bust could be, could be there for an eternity. And in 2013, there was another centennial project that stems off of this bust that lists the various clergy of the church. When I talk about the soccer club, St. Anthony's Soccer Club, there was a soccer club, but a lot of us know the soccer club as being a primary banquet hall located on St. Anthony Street, formerly Arlington Avenue. And it has become a social and cultural center for the community. And it's one of the many banquet halls in our community. And we have, we do have many, Sala San Marco, Marconi Center, Tudor Hall. They've all provided space for many family and community functions. Okay. So we have here in St. Anthony's Church, the Italian colony window. And this was a window that is dedicated to St. Anthony's, or to St. Anthony by the colony. And that's what the Italian community was referred to for many, many years. And this is this window, along with all the windows at the church, was created by Guido Nincari. Guido Nincari, sort of known as the Michelangelo of North America. He was responsible for the stained glass and the frescoes throughout many churches across North America. We are, I think, very fortunate to have his heritage work at St. Anthony. And there is a wonderful chapter in A Journey of Faith, which is a book that chronicles the first 100 years of St. Anthony's Church, a book that's still available at the church office. And there's a wonderful chapter in there strictly on the art of the church, going into the frescoes and the windows that grace our church. The small little drawing is done, painting actually, is done by Ralph Burton. And I think it's a mock-up of the area in and around the church. Ralph Burton was a very famous Ottawa painter. He trained under the Group of Seven, primarily A.Y. Jackson. And this painting is from the early 1950s. And you can see the church in the background. I think it was, it's very special to have that. And I know that that picture was included in A Journey of Faith. Guido Nincari, as I say, known as the Michelangelo of North America, his work is renowned, and he would come into church in the early morning hours after the Lecari family had applied the plaster to the walls of the church, and Nincari would come to do his frescoes, to do his art. That was to do his thing. And what we have are treasures that remain for a long, long time. And we also, if you're in the church and you look above the altar, you'll see on either side of the altar 2 young angels. And those angels were young girls from the community, Audrey Colleen and Madeline Warren, who sat for hours while Nincari painted them. And their images remain forever. Next. Celebrating in the community. So we have the first picture is a Christmas party in 1939. The young boys and girls of the community, they've all received gifts. It looks like the little boys have received shovels. There's many familiar faces in there. This is a treasured picture. We also then, in that picture though of 1939, you will have some young children in there that 6 months later, their families will be impacted by the events of June 1940, the internment, and I'll touch upon that in a little bit. I juxtapose that with the Carnevale de Bambini, which is an ongoing annual event for children in the community. There's a costume pageant, there's games operated by the many wonderful associations in the community, and it just it is a fun afternoon, but it becomes a very philanthropic event. And over the years, money has been donated to many charitable causes such as CHIO or the Lamplighters Fund, and so it's a wonderful event that children look forward to. One of the picture of the wedding, which is the wedding of Rose DiNardo and Gino Tiezzi. And this wedding is takes place in August of 1928. It is the most beautiful wedding picture that I have ever seen. It is in the possession of the Italian Canadian Historical Center, given by the Tiezzi family. And in the write-up in the Ottawa Journal the following day, it calls it a marriage of international interest. And you see the various bridesmaids and the bride has orange blossoms imported from France that hold her tulle veil. It's a most beautiful write-up, but it looks to have been a most beautiful reception and a beautiful wedding. The Italian-Canadian Ladies Social Club of 1934 is one of the many women's groups that start to form in the 30s and the 40s. Another one is the Loggia of Margherita de Savoy, named after the queen consort of the King of Italy. And a lot of these women are the wives of the men who were out in the community leaders. And so that's one of the groups. In the 1940s, in 1948 to be precise, you have St. Anthony's Church Ladies Auxiliary being formed. And they are around till 2019, 71 years of devoted service to the church. Music's a big thing with the Italian community. And there always seems to be music at dances, at the picnics. And so you start out with the Rocco Graziadei, or Graziadei, as they would call them, their business card trio. And Rocco Graziadei was born in 1859. And this picture is taken from the late 1800s. And this becomes a family affair. This trio of musicians is very, very well renowned, plays at Rideau Hall, plays on Parliament Hill, and has quite a stellar reputation. The leaders of the community, many who belong to the church, form the Italian Colony Band. And they play at church functions, in the procession. There's also, and I don't have a very clear picture of it, but there's also a young men's band, and they are pretty much the sons of these gentlemen in this picture. The mandolin belonged to Tullio Locatelli. Tullio Locatelli was a man who lived to the age of 102, and he was a shoe repairman along Preston Street. Who eventually moved uptown, received a contract for shoe repair for national defense. But Tullio loved his music, and this was his mandolin. Tullio Locatelli belonged to the Locatelli family that owned what currently is known today as Preston Hardware. It was known then as Locatelli Hardware. And Locatelli family had it from 1945 until 1973. Until the Giannetti and Frangioni families purchased it. And you now know it today as Preston Hardware. It has been in that location for almost 75 years. 362 Preston Street. So the first picture here, you have Pat Adamo and Italo Tiezzi, two very dedicated community leaders. Italo Tiezzi is the son of Gino and Rosa Tiezzi. Pat Adamo is the daughter of the Guzzo and Adamo families that ran the first grocery store on Preston Street that opened in 1912 at 362 Preston. And what you're seeing here is a sculpture in front of 362 Preston, which is now Giovanni's Restaurant. And this sculpture, along with all the sculptures that line Preston Street, were done by C.J. Fleury. And the reading says, "Hello, Pasqualina and Giuseppe." So Pasqualina is Pat, Giuseppe is her brother Joe. And we're waiting for you here for the Feast of San Giovanni in Fiore. San Giovanni in Fiore is the small town where Pat's ancestors came from in Italy. Local businesses. So we had the Graziadei family with the orchestra. They also had a business that, if you look closely at this first picture, it says Banco Graziadei. This is from 1907. And what they did is they had sort of a financial services operation within this store. There was also a grocery store. There was also an office where people could buy tickets for trips across the ocean, and just many, many other things. And you have Rocco Brescia Day standing out in front with his family. You have as well the Mandia, picture of the Mandia store, which they were in business from 1902. They were, I would say, purveyors of groceries to Rideau Hall, to the Diplomatic Corps. You also have a picture of J. Sasso and Son. They begin this store in the early 1920s. And it's a store with big oak barrels, and you can go in and buy all the products that people would be able to find in Italy. And it made people very comfortable that they could go and find goods that they were used to. J. Sasso and Son is the current location of La Bottega Necastro, so on 62 and 64 George Street. The Badali brothers, Sam and Leo Badali, began business in Lowertown in 1912. They moved to their location in the Glebe on the corner of Bank and 2nd, and they carry on business from 1923 until 1986. The Mrs. Badali was Josephine Mandia. So you had a lot of these businesses. They knew each other. Many of these fruit purveyors came from Sicily, and they all seem to know one another. And when you read various news reports, you will find these names throughout, scattered with all the other names of the community. Galla's Bakery. You have a picture here of Maria and Pancrazio Galla and some of their family members. They start a business known as Galla's Bakery they start on Somerset Street, move to Rochester and Louisa. They start their business in 1908, and they, at their height, employed close to 300 people. They sponsored sports teams. They were also very charitable to the church in terms of donating one of the church bells, as well as one of these stained glass windows. Joseph Arullo Barber Shop. That is sort of, that was the Cheers, I guess, of Preston Street. People would go on Saturday mornings, get their hair cut. Men would swap tails. Everybody knew the Arullo Barber Shop. It was operated by Joseph Arullo and by his son, Tony. And Joseph Arullo's grandson, Joe Arullo, is the current owner and manager of the St. Anthony Soccer Club. You have La Roma Restaurant is one of the early restaurants, begins in 1962. You have Ambrose Restaurant belonging in 1906. I could not find a picture of Ambrose, but it was begun by Frank Imbro. And those restaurants, I think, lead the way to the variety of Italian restaurants we have today throughout the city. And I don't want to name them because I be forgetting one along the way, but they're all wonderful businesses and wonderful community citizens. There you just have a shot of Preston and Gladstone Street. The Preston Hotel. Most people today know it as the Prescott Hotel, but when it opens in 1934 by Giuseppe Costantini and Antonio DeCipio, you have a common tavern that offered rooms. And this picture here is a picture of Giuseppe Costantini standing out in front of the Preston Hotel. It's often known as the last chance. It's the last chance to get a drink before people hit the Prescott Highway. And in Ontario of those days, Temperance, Ontario, a drink was hard to find at some time. So the Preston Hotel becomes the Prescott Hotel in 1941. Below that, there's just a group shot of the Giuseppe Costantini family taken in 1938. So Mr. and Mrs. Costantini with their 7 children. This is a list of the Sons of Italy dues. I don't have a year when it was taken, but you have many of the old names of the pioneer families. Every month they sign in and they pay their 15 cents due. June 10th, 1940, Canada declares war on Italy, and over 31,000 Italian individuals are picked up and deemed enemy aliens. In Ottawa, there's 5 gentlemen. You have Giuseppe Costantini, Rocco Pantalone, Gino Tiezzi, Carlo Scarabelli, and Dr. Vittoria Sabetta. And they are taken, held without charges in the Petawawa camp, and they're all assigned a prisoner of war numbers. My bias here, my grandfather was Giuseppe Costantini, and his POW number was 189, and they did wear shirts with bullseyes on the back. He was in Petawawa for just a little under a year. Here you have various relics from the internment camp. The letter opener was made by Rocco Pantalone for his granddaughter in 1940. The charcoal sketch is a charcoal sketch of my grandfather done by Guido Cassini, who was a wartime artist. And this was done in 1940. And then you see a vase that's made out of a soup bone. And I have the vase in my possession with a flower on the front, and the inscription on the back reads POW 189 Petawawa. After the war. So right now in Piazza Dante, which is located across from the church, you have a memorial wall that marks the names of the gentlemen that were interned, as well as the names of the young Italian Canadian soldiers that went off to war and lost their lives during battle. There's also the name of Alfredo Mancini, who lost his life in the First World War. And when I mentioned Guido Nincari, there's a memorial window in St. Anthony's Church where there is a depiction of Alfredo Mancini being carried off by the Archangel. For King and Country scroll hangs in the hallway of St. Anthony's School, which was once known as Dante Academy. This scroll records the young men who were students at Dante Academy who went off to war. And beside some of those names, you will see a gold star with an RIP. So the young men that did lose their lives in battle. After the war, Italy is in such a bad state of repair, and the Italians from Ottawa, as well as some of the other larger cities, have a Canadian Aid to Italy fund to help build it up. And then in the 50s and 60s, you have the wave of immigration. So people are leaving Italy, people are coming to a new country, people are coming to Ottawa. And this photo is one of the many boats that carried these people. This picture was provided to me by Pier 21. The other side, there's a passage paper of a gentleman from 1956. Okay, next. Okay, media. The gentlemen at the top are Giovanni and Massimo Favilla, who in 1956, they've got such pure Italian that they are asked to do a radio show, and this radio show airs from 1956 through to the early 70s, and it airs on CKCH Hull Station. L'Ora di Ottawa is the first Italian newspaper that is started by the Colonnesi family, carried on by Mario Colonese's daughter Renata and her husband Elio, and it has gone through successive ownership. This is the original copy, November 1968. It's held at the Italian Canadian Historical Center. Giovanna Panico, another wonderful community individual, community leader. She was the executive producer of Teletrenta, which is still a Rogers Cablevision show that profiled the community. Giovanna was a professor at Carleton University, and she passed away in 2018. But this year, the National Congress of Italian Canadians Foundation began the Giovanna Panico Memorial Bursary Award. There's also Chin Radio that began here in 2003. That's Chin from Toronto and the Lombardi family.
Sorry, Trina, I just wanted to jump in for a sec. I just want to remind all our audience members, we're coming up on the end of the presentation. And please, again, I want to remind you to use the Q&A function down at the bottom to share any stories or questions you can have. We'd be glad to get to them as soon as we can. Sorry, Trina, just wanted to.
Okay, no, Will. Okay, expropriation. This is something that takes place in the mid-1960s to the area around the church. And so many of the Italian families that have settled in and around that area receive a letter that they've got to give up their home. There's going to be a new social housing development built. There's going to be a new high school built. And so where do they go? They have very short notice to find new lodging. And so thus begins a wave of individuals that move out towards Parkwood Hills area, Nepean, Heron Park, and the new community forms around the church area. Villa Marconi, found on Baseline Road, opens in 1999 after the stewardship of many wonderful community leaders. It becomes a long-term care center, retirement home for Italian Canadians who can feel comfortable. People will be speaking their language. They'll be served their own food, and it's just a wonderful member of the community. And you will find Marconi Center is one of the banquet halls on one of the sides, and to the other side, you'll find the Italian Canadian Historical Center. Okay, this is just a wonderful article on the Necastro family. The Castros are one of the many families and who run a business selling Italian goods. You also have Di Rienzo Foods, you have Luciano's, you have Farmer's Pick. As I say, they're just all very good community citizens, and this is and La Bottega Necastro comes from this family. Madonna della Resurrezione. So we talk about the people who have to come out to the West End. In 1985, they decide that they're going to build another church in the West End on Fisher Avenue. So the congregation begins in 1985, and the building opens in 1989. This is the other picture is their annual mass and festival. They also have a religious procession as well. This takes place in May. Sports was very, very important. I mentioned the church hall earlier. The church hall would be the venue for boxing and wrestling matches. And you'll see names of Carmonico and Mancini and Pantalone. This is a poster from 1937. You have a Canadian Pacific Telegram that comes to my father, who is all of about 18 years of age, to attend Major League Baseball spring training camp. So he goes down to Pine Bluff, Arkansas at the height of segregation, tries out for a baseball team, comes back home, but has stories to tell about his trip down there for sure during this important point in American history. Baseball was something that was the young men of the community loved. It was either the Red Sox or the Yankees. And another family of athletes was the Shirelli family. And many of the Shirelli young men went off on hockey scholarships. Peter Shirelli, who is the son of Frank Shirelli, is a lawyer, works with the Ottawa Senators, but goes on to win the Stanley Cup as the general manager of the Boston Bruins in 2011. Patsy Guzzo, I referenced earlier, Guzzo and Adamo, same line of family. In 1948, is part of the Royal Canadian Air Force Olympic gold medal hockey team and goes on to run a sporting goods store in Ottawa East. Frank Sinatra comes to Ottawa in July of 1949 and for a concert at the old auditorium on Argyle Avenue. The day before that concert, he meets with members of the Italian community. In the back corner, you will see Italo Tiesi. You'll also see Father Jerome, and the Italian community presents Sinatra with a briefcase. In the community, we have Maria Pellegrini, a leading opera singer. She has sung with Pavarotti. She has sung at Covent Garden in London. She is still a member of the community. We have Robert Shirelli, who was the mayor of Ottawa from the Shirelli family, 2001 through 2006. Prior to that, he was an MPP, and after he left municipal politics, he went back to the Ontario legislature and was an MPP and cabinet minister. Nello Bortolotti, one of the most loved individuals in our community, a volunteer till his early 90s, involved in so many groups, too numerous to mention. Just a wonderful, wonderful person. Yes, and so we have many construction companies have built the city of Ottawa. I've only picked 3, but that doesn't diminish the work of many others. In the first picture, the City Italians pick Man of the Year. That picture is Emilio Duri, and he is chosen in 1979 as the Man of the Year. Mel Dury begins Dury Tile and Marble, one of the top marble companies, in 1946. The picture below, Luigi Mion, Central Precast begins in 1956. It's currently still in the Mion family and it's celebrating its 65th anniversary. Rizzeri and Antonio Belli, they begin their companies, Belli Brothers, in 1954, and they are now into their 65th year of operation. Many of the buildings that dot our landscape, or those over on the Gatineau side, were built by the Belli brothers. These are well-respected businessmen, but there are so many. I can't name them all, but it's not to take away from the amount of work that they do or did. This last picture, Steve talked about Italian Week just finishing. This is a picture in 2011. Still holds the, I think the most people ever in attendance at an Italian Week function. These are the flag throwers, or the Spadambiatori from Carpenetto Romano. And Italian Week brings them from Italy in 2011. They perform on Parliament Hill. They perform along Preston Street. And it just shows that there still is a link to the old country. And there's still so many people that are Canadians, but still go back to Italy on an annual basis. And there still is such a wonderful relationship. And I believe that's the end. Yes, it is. I'm sorry I went very quick, but there was a lot there to discuss.
Oh, there was, and you warned us at the start that this is just a cursory glance at the history. I mean, the history that you gave us just now, I mean, that was everything from, early immigration to building churches to grocery stores to construction companies to Frank Sinatra visiting. So I think you had quite a bit of subject matter to cover there, Trina. But thank you for the fantastic presentation and for the great collection of photos as well. I mean, it's always great to hear about the individuals and the families and the groups and the stories that shape the community. But it's always something different when you get to see them with your own eyes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. It's and you know what? We've in the meantime we've had some great questions coming in from the audience. So
okay.
Renee, I know I mentioned Renee and I have a couple questions ourselves, but I'd actually really love to just jump right into the audience questions, if that's all
Of
right.
course, of course.
And we had one right at the start about Father Jerome. Do we know if Father Jerome, from Eloise, I should say, do we know if Father Jerome ever lived in Brantford, Ontario?
Not as far as I know. He was born in Montreal, and so when he did come to St. Anthony's, because he could speak French, Italian, and English, as he was the ideal candidate. And as far as I know, no. I think when he left St. Anthony's for a short period of time, he did go back to Montreal, and then he did come back.
Okay, interesting. And yeah, Renee, go ahead.
I do see one here that is asking about the Joseph Arullo barber shop from John. Yes. Here. It says, the barber shop was located on what part of Preston Street? Is it the Hare and Hound that is there today beside Pub Italia?
It is. Yep, between the blocks of Norman and Camilla. And it was, I would sort of deem it like a Cheers. Everybody knew everybody knew each other's name, and the Arullo family were very, very well respected. And so, yeah, my father went there every Saturday morning, I know, to get his haircut, along with many other people.
Nice. Now we have one from David. Was there discrimination against the early Italians, apart from the World War II internment, of course? He says he's heard some people change their names in order to find work. So what can you tell us about that?
I think there was some discrimination. You'll see a lot of names that maybe became somewhat anglicized. Valentino may have become Valentine. You see some names that have dropped vowels at the end. And I think discrimination happens in communities, and here you have an early wave of immigration in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that are coming to a city that's primarily, let's say, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant almost. And so you have people coming from another country. They can't speak the language. They're primarily being employed in blue-collar jobs, trades, or hospitality, cleaning, or whatever. And so, yes, there was some discrimination, I would think so, as well as during the period of 1940 to 45, during the war years.
Now,
sort of based in the kind of tail ending that question, there is a question here from Marissa, and she says, how did the Italian community react to the apology given by the Canadian government to the treatment of the Italian Canadians in the Second World War?
I think most people who were expecting the apology were somewhat grateful for it, but it did take a long time to come. It was a formal apology offered in the House of Commons. I think overall it was well accepted, but it's something that could have happened earlier. But I still think there is still some work to do, and I hope part of that challenge, and I know I'll be advocating it, is to have educational awareness of this dark chapter of Canadian history.
Now, I do have a question in mind that I'll ask in just a second, but I just want to actually get through some of the comments, because we've got some quite nice comments coming in from Renata Coppola, former editor of L'Ora di Ottawa. My compliments to all of you for such a beautiful presentation. Thank you, Renata. That's very kind of you. Thank you for your presentation, Trina. And also fascinating presentation, Trina, from Roslyn. So many similarities to the families who built Ottawa's Jewish community, which I have to agree with Roslyn there. That the sort of, I remember, the talk we had in a couple months ago about the Jewish community, the ideas of faith, obviously very important, food, very important as well. So yeah, no, it's, thank you for your comment, Roslyn.
And I have to mention that I did meet Roslyn at the Jewish Community Center a few years ago when I went to take a course there. And that's where we first met.
Now, there is a question here, sort of actually following up partly on the question of internment. So why did Canada declare war on Italy? And also, how many were in the internment camp? Do we know that number?
So you had, well, Canada declared a war on Italy because Great Britain had, and Canada followed. 31,000 individuals were picked up on June the 10th. June 10th through June 12th, these individuals were picked up. About 670 individuals, 670 men and 4 women were interned. The women were interned in a wing of Kingston Penitentiary. But the 670 some men were interned in out in Alberta, as well as in Petawawa. The primary camp was Petawawa. And this is where you had the internees coming from the larger centers of Ontario, Quebec. You had the mayor of Quebec, or mayor of Montreal interned. Camille Hood was interned. You had Guido Nincari was interned because of the fresco in the church in Montreal in Little Italy. The fresco that depicts the Lateran Treaty of 1929, showing Mussolini on the horse, and that was taken as having fascist leanings, and there's still some debate today as to whether or not that fresco should remain in that church in Montreal. But so there were about 600 and I'd say about 670 individuals fully interned. Many for less than a year, some for up to 5 years. Some went from Petawawa to Gagetown, New Brunswick.
Wow. Jeez.
And never any charges laid. And coming back home and never talking about the experience. And this is a common thread that runs through any of the families you speak to, any of the reports you read. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And I can tell you in terms of our own family, with the Preston Hotel, they had to change their name to the Prescott Hotel because it came under some new ownership, because my grandfather lost ownership of the hotel by being interned. And when he came back, he was never able to regain that.
Jeez. It's a dark period in that history, and I can understand why some people would not want to talk about that. That's
yeah. It was a shame.
I do have another question here about the media specifically. So how did the media help the community, speaking specifically of Massimo and John Favella's radio program?
So Massimo and John, originally their sister had been approached by Father Jerome to do a radio show, and she volunteered her brothers. And I think just by playing Italian music and speaking their language, it made the new wave, the second wave of immigration, feel just perhaps a little bit more at home. And it did air, as I mentioned, on CKCH, Hull radio station at that time. And I can remember listening to it. My mother would listen to it every Saturday morning, and it was just lovely Italian music. And I think it was just a way of making these new citizens welcome in this country. And I think it went a wonderful way, just like being able to read the Italian newspaper, or going to Giovanni's snack bar to pick up Italian magazines, or later on having Teletrenta, which spoke to people in their own language. And you also had a large presence in the universities as well. They offered Italian culture classes, Italian language classes. So people were made to feel at home.
Nice.
Yeah, and kind of like speaking to this sense of like community during this second wave. We do have a comment here from Stella saying, my parents were on the sister ship to Saturnia called the Vulcania in 1958. And I guess that kind of leads into another question from Maria here. It says, which parts of Italy did the majority of Ottawa's Italians come from, and whether you have any information regarding that?
So I think the two major regions were the Abruzzo region and the Calabrian region. They have a lot of population here, and there's a small town in the Abruzzo region called Pretoto, which has a large presence here in Ottawa. And there was mention that there were more Pretorese people here in Ottawa than there are, back in the town of Pretoto. But a lot of them do go back in the summertime. You also had a good representation from northern Italy, so from the Friuli region, and but the majority came from the southern climes. And I think the early pioneer families, or founding families, as I call them, they came from a lot of the southern regions as well. And I mentioned the fruit dealers coming from, they all seem to come from Sicily, from this little Provincia de Palermo in Sicily. So they were familiar, I guess, with fruit.
On that note, I gotta give a shout out. Not that I've ever been there, but a shout out to the little town of Zagarise in Calabria, which is where my own mother is from. So from the south.
Of course, you have to shout out. Of course, you do.
And also, I just want to point out to those guests that are with us. So my colleague Rebecca has posted in the chat some resources that you can check out if you're interested in checking out the history of the Italian community further. So not in the Q&A section, but in the chat there, Rebecca's posted some resources you can check out. Now there was another question. Oh yeah, this is there was a question about the impact of internment on families generally. So obviously the actual history of internment is pretty, is obviously, again, a dark chapter, but, and you mentioned, I think it was your grandfather, was it?
Yeah.
Who lost ownership of the Prescott. So can you talk a bit more about the sort of day-to-day impact on families?
Well, I think you have to look on it as, and I mean, there's, as I mentioned, there's a common thread that runs through communities from coast to coast to coast, families that were impacted. You had primarily probably the breadwinner being taken away. Many women obviously didn't work; they were raising families. In my own family's case, my grandfather had lost his wife the year before, and so here you have then the older children of the family have to step in and be the mother and the father when the father is in the internment camp. So you're providing for younger siblings, perhaps some of the community not being aware of why the men were taken away. There's that embarrassment. There's also some discrimination. My father would speak about a teacher at the Dante Academy who would protect the children of the internees from bullying and from any intimidation. But then you have, a lot of the families being told not to speak Italian by their father when he returns home, because maybe this could happen again. So this is a common thread that runs throughout so many stories by so many families. Yeah. So the impact is there and still is there with many people. I know I've met many new people across the country leading up to this internment apology, and the story's the same.
Yeah. And now there was, what other question was there? Oh, from Karen Fournier. This is an interesting one. What was the community like on the Quebec side in Hull and Gatineau? Did anyone settle there? If so, why? If not, why not?
I think some people settled there. I don't have any figures for that. But I do believe that some members of the Italian community did settle there. But primarily, the population was in Ottawa here. And as I say, between the years of 1971 to 1981, the area in and around the church, just because people moved out, it dropped in half. There were in and around 1,500 families that lived in that Corso Italia, Preston Street area up to and the surrounding streets around the church, and it dropped to about 600 individuals. So it was there. The community grew, and the community, continues to grow. And you have you now have the community made up of children or grandchildren, great grandchildren of let's say the first families, but of the new immigrants. Now, these people are leading members of the community. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're teachers and professors and engineers and that. So it's just the community has become almost, it's a current community, but it's also a historical community. And I think it's, you have people marrying other multicultural groups and that, and but I still think people retain their Italian culture, and they for sure return to St. Anthony's Church, which I think still remains the heart and soul of the community, where everything seemed to stem from.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's a great community, as I know personally, and it's funny sitting here doing a virtual talk, hearing about things like St. Anthony's and all the businesses on Preston, and I just, I have to admit, I can't wait to be able to experience them in person all over again.
Well, it's a wonderful. Having been involved for many years in the community, there's so many wonderful individuals and good community citizens. And when I talk about, the businesses, the restaurants, and the grocery stores, and that they're wonderful community citizens. And I think we should be so fortunate to have them in our midst, like many communities have amongst their own midst. But I can only speak to our community, and these men and women are wonderful individuals.
Yeah. Now we're almost at 10 past 8 here. So for all those comments and questions that we weren't able to get to, we are actually going to be having or taking a copy of those questions and comments. So we will be glad to pass them on. And Trina, if we can pass them on, maybe with and answer them with your help in the coming days and weeks.
I can do so. Do so.
We'd be glad to get those answers. But thank you so much, everybody, for the kind comments. And there's too many to get to, if I may say so myself. So thank you so much, Trina, for the discussion, for answering as many questions as we could get to tonight, and obviously for your presentation as well. Is just fantastic. And again, like I said before, it's great to hear about it. It's also something else to see it. So thank you so much, Trina, for that. We really appreciate your presence.
I was honored. I'm very much honored to do it. And as I say, any questions that come my way, I'll do my best to answer them. And there's lots more documentation I have, just didn't want to inundate Renee. I have to thank her for being able to put those all together. And you all did a wonderful job. The guidance was, I really thoroughly appreciated it, and it was fun to do, and I'll do it again anytime.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Trina. And I would like to say as well, thank you to my colleague Renee, for helping us out tonight, both with the discussion and steady hand on the PowerPoint. And thank you, as always, to Rebecca Webb, our Manager of Revenue and Operations and our Zoom Master. To find out more about our museum, if I can throw in a little plug for the Bytown and our programs and our collection, or if you feel inclined, as always, to make a small donation or become a member, please visit bytownmuseum.com. And I believe Rebecca has also thrown some links, some Bytown Museum related links in the chat that you can check out there. So also let me add, this is our penultimate virtual talk for this half of the year. So our final talk will actually be on July 28th with guest speaker Luc Lalonde, who will be joining us to talk about the history of Ottawa's tech sector, to discuss its past, its present, and of course, its future. And last but not least, if you are following the Euro Cup, I believe Italy is playing this afternoon on Saturday, this coming Saturday. So keep an eye out for that. So thanks again to you, Trina. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who participated.